So in this video, we're just going to finish up section 5.1. We just have two more examples to do. So example number 3, notice we are graphing, okay, so from what we just did, the graphs are going to either look like the reciprocal function, that first one up there, or the rocket, which would be the squared function, reciprocal squared. Notice the difference between those. It's the denominator, whether the denominator has a squared in it or not. So the two that we did previously did not have a square in it, but this one has a square. So that tells you it's going to look like the rocket. Okay, so we're going to, so what is it going to look like? The rocket, or if you don't have me as a teacher, reciprocal squared. Okay, so it's going to look like the rocket. We know that this plus 2 means we're going to start 2 up, right? We're going to move up 2. Think of that as the x squared plus 2. We're so used to dealing with quadratics. But that just means we're going to take that u and move it up 2. Now this minus 4 is on the inside of this 1 over of the inside of the rocket. So that would be like saying x minus 4 squared plus 2. So that would move it instead of left. Remember, it's backwards when it's inside. So it's going to move it right 4 places. Okay. So if you remember, the rocket had vertical asymptotes that were right here, and it had a horizontal here. Now we're going to move those asymptotes. We're going to move them up 2 and right 4. Okay, so that means that if I go up 2, then I'm going to make my horizontal asymptote right here. And then right 4, I'm going to move it to the right 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's going to put my vertical asymptote right there. Okay, I guess we could go ahead and say what that is. The vertical asymptote is x equals 4, and the horizontal asymptote is what, y equals 2. So y equals 2. We can go ahead and do that. Now let's plug in some points. Again, I like to plug in the points that are closest to where those cross. So that would be, x is 4. So it's going to be right around 4. So I'm going to go, I'll put in, I don't know, maybe 2, 3, 4, 5, something like that. I don't know. Okay, let's try it. So when I put in a 2, I'm going to have 1 over 2 minus 4 squared plus 2. So that's going to be 1 over negative 2 squared plus 2. So that's, what, a fourth? So that's going to be 2 and a fourth. Now I'm going to plug in 3. 1 over 3 minus 4 squared plus 2. So that's 1 over negative 1 squared. So that's going to give me, what, 1 plus 2? So that's going to give me a 3, right? Now, when I put a 4 in there, we have a problem, right? Because if I put a 4 right here, that's going to give me undefined, right? So, whoops, should be 3. That should be undefined. Let's put in a 5. 1 over 5 minus 4 squared plus 2. So 1 over 1 squared plus 2. So that's going to give me, what, a 3? I might have to put in a 6 also, just so I have more than 1 point on that other side. 1 over 6 minus 4 squared plus 2. 1 over 2 squared plus 2. So that's 1/4 plus 2, or 2 and a fourth. All right, so let's just plot those points, okay? 2 and a 4th. It's going to be about right there. 3 and 3. 1, 2, 3. That'd be about right there. Then undefined, and we got our 5. 5 and 3. 3 is there. And then 6. It's up 2 and 4. So it's going to do like this. Whoop. And then on that side. All right, so it does look like what we said. It's going to look like our rocket, and we've moved it up 2, and we've moved it to the right 4 places. Okay, so then let's talk about the domain and range. So the domain, notices that's what your x can be, and it can be anything except where that vertical asymptote is. So anything but 4. So negative infinity to 4, and then 4 to infinity. Now my range, again, I don't need any of that down here, right? So the range is going to actually start at what, 2? So we're going to go 2 to infinity. Okay. All right. So our last problem actually is a little tricky, okay? What makes this tricky is the top. Notice all these other ones had a 1 on top, had a 1 on top. Or that one has a 2 on top, which stretched it a little bit. But notice it didn't have any letters on the top. This one has some letters on the top. So, first step, use division and translation to describe the graph. What in the world does that mean? That just means let's go ahead and do some division. Okay, so I'm going to do what it says. I'm going to take x plus 2 and divide it by x plus 1. X plus 2, and I'm going to divide it by x, plus 1. So let's see. It'll go in there one time. I got x plus 1, and then I'm going to subtract, change my signs. So that's gone, and I get a 1 remainder. So my answer is 1 plus 1 over x plus 1. So I could rewrite that function as y equals 1 over x plus 1 and then plus 1 on the outside. Now that's starting to look a little bit more like what we've done in the past, okay? Notice this bottom right here. The bottom does not have a squared, so we know it's not going to be the rocket, okay? It's going to be the reciprocal function. We know that, so I'm going to write that down. It doesn't tell me to describe it, but I'm going to. Reciprocal. That plus 1 on the bottom means I'm going to move it left. Move left 1. And then this 1 on the outside means I'm going to move it up 1. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and draw my horizontal and vertical asymptotes. So move left 1 means I'm going to have a vertical asymptote there, and move up 1. I'm going to have a horizontal asymptote there. So I need to just plug in points right around that -1 area. So let's see, if I want to plug in some points around -1, we'll do -2, and then my -1, and then my 0. I might need some more, but let's see. If I plug in a -2, I'm going to have y equals -2 plus 2 over -2 plus 1. So that's going to give me 0 over -1. So that's just going to be 0. When I put my -1 in there, notice what happens on the bottom. Whoops, -1 plus 1. So that's going to be undefined, which we knew. I didn't really have to plug that in. Now let's plug in my 0. 0 plus 2, 0 plus 1. So that's going to give me a 2. Let's see if we can graph from there. That we might be able to. -2, 0, and 0, 2. I know if I know what it looks like, I could just go ahead and graph it, but it might make you feel better. We could go ahead and stick a 1 in there if you want to. Let's stick a 1 in. Y equals 1 plus 2 over 1 plus 1. So 3 halves, 1 and a half. So over here, 1, 1 and a half. So I know it's going to come down. So it's going to go up like that. It's going to come down. We could put more in here if you wanted to, if you want to put more points in, but I don't really have to because I know exactly what it's going to do. So my domain is going to go from -infinity to what? Where I've got my vertical asymptote, right? To -1. And then from -1 to infinity. And then my range is going to go from -infinity to that's supposed to be infinity, not an 8. -infinity to my horizontal asymptote, which is +1. And then 1 to infinity. And you can connect them with a U or semicolon if you would like. So that's sort of messy, but that's what your graph should look like. So you should be able to do all of your homework in section 5.1.